Right.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. As Megan has said, my name is Justin. I'll introduce myself in a moment, but for now, I just have a couple reminders before we get started here. If you're calling in, please mute your phone. If you don't have a dedicated mute button, pressing *6 should mute your phone. If you're using your computer audio, please remain muted. During the Q&A session at the end, you'll be able to unmute yourself to ask a question. Lastly, this session is being recorded. We will add this recording to the Alaska Tribal Resilience Learning Network website. We invite those of you who are able to access the chat on Zoom to introduce yourself. And our offices for the Alaska Tribal Resilience Learning Network are located at the International Arctic Research Center, which is located within the traditional territory of the Lower Tanana Dene people. And I am coming in from Anchorage, Alaska, which is located on the traditional homelands of the Dena'ina Athabascan people. And with that, just to start my video, hi again, as I said, my name is Justin. I'm part of the Alaska Tribal Resilience Learning Network, which I'll refer to as the Learning Network from now on. The Learning Network is hosting the information session today, entitled Update from the White House, Indigenous Knowledge and Federal Decision Making. And this is put on with collaborations through our partners. You can see at the bottom there, we're part of the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center. This is hosted in collaboration with the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society. And then I've already mentioned the International Arctic Research Center, which is part of the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And I'm going to turn off my video now. It's nice to say hi to everybody, to try to conserve bandwidth. And I encourage anyone else to turn off their video for those people who may be in areas where bandwidth may be an issue. So thank you. All right, so first, starting with the Learning Network, who again is hosting the information session today, our goal is to create a community of learning, sharing, and support for Alaska tribes and Indigenous communities that are responding to the current and future impacts of climate change. There are a few ways that you can participate in the Learning Network, in addition to attending the information session like you are today. First, we are available for monthly or as needed one-on-one check-in calls for tribes and communities that are planning or just getting started with their climate change adaptation projects. Depending on the unique concerns and priorities of your community, we will also look for opportunities to connect you with other communities and experts that can best support your work. We will also begin hosting monthly Learning Network calls again. These calls may have different conversation topics each month, but one of the main goals of these calls is to provide a space where communities can hear and learn from one another. These calls might also be a forum to work on different aspects of climate change adaptation plans or assessments. If you haven't already done so, please consider signing up for the Tribal Resilience e-bulletin. This is distributed approximately every 3 weeks and includes upcoming events, funding opportunities, and links to different resources that support tribal communities in climate change adaptation. The newsletter is also a great place to learn about upcoming information sessions and trainings that we'll be offering through the Learning Network. You can find additional information on the Learning Network on our website, and we'll be showing you the website at the end of this information session. Today, we have a chance to hear from Haley K. Scott about how the federal government is looking for ways to be intentional about including Indigenous knowledge in federal decision-making. In the recent 2021 Status of Tribes and Climate Change Report, tribes identified a key message about the federal government being responsive to tribal nations. I'm sorry, someone's coming through there. If you could please mute yourself. Working collaborations with tribal governments and people to shape diverse solutions involves including Indigenous knowledge. Just a few months later, the current administration released a presidential memo that elevates Indigenous knowledge. And so we have here on this slide, the presidential memorandum from November 2021, recognizing Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge as one of the many important bodies of knowledge that contributes to the scientific, technical, social, and economic advancements of the United States and to our collective understanding of the natural world. Part of the purpose of today's information session is to give those of you attending some information and time to consider any input you can give the federal government next week during their formal tribal consultation that will take place on September 22nd. Examples of how Indigenous knowledge has been used to inform federal decision-making in Alaska are the Federal Subsistence Management Program and the Alaska Migratory Bird Co-Management Council, which both rely on Indigenous knowledge in their regulations-making processes. Indigenous and rural residents provide knowledge to the regional management bodies. The federal analyses utilize both Indigenous knowledge and scientific data while developing recommendations to the statewide decision-making body, which puts new or changed fishing and hunting regulations into effect. We will hear from our speaker about the federal guidance that is currently being developed on the inclusion of ITEK, Indigenous Traditional Ecological Knowledge, in federal decision-making, and information about the upcoming listening session that will be held next week, where tribal leaders can inform this process. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Haley K. Scott. Haley is a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and a descendant of the Klamath, Yurok, and Sokogan Band of Chippewa Indians. She currently serves as a policy assistant for climate and environment at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Thank you for being here to present with us today, Haley, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. And I think Maggie's going to help bring up some slides for me. And there we go. Okay. And so I'm going to keep my camera on just for this beginning portion, but surprisingly, I'm having bandwidth issues on my end too. And so I might turn it off during my presentation because I don't want to drop off. So again, yes, my name is Haley K. Scott, and I'm a policy assistant from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And I'm calling in today from Washington, D.C. on the East Coast. So it's actually 3 o'clock over here on my end, but good morning to everybody. And today I'm going to be talking about elevating Indigenous knowledge and federal decision making. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about the Biden administration's polar efforts that we're helping to lead here at OSTP, and just some additional context about tribal consultation. And so you can go to the next slide. So I just included an introduction slide for myself. So again, I'm a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, the Klamath Tribes, Yurok Tribe, and Sokogan Band of Chippewa. I grew up in the Klamath Basin in Southern Oregon. My background, I went to the University of Oregon for my Bachelor of Arts degree, so I'm a Duck, go Ducks. My professional background includes tribal engagement, consultation, climate change, and environmental and climate justice. Also the big sister of 3 younger siblings. And I've included 2 photos on my slide here. The top one is of Crater Lake in just late August. I got to go home for a little bit, which was really nice. And then the bottom photo I have is of the Upper Klamath Lake in early February of last year with some of the cascades in the background. And if you can see that the lake is frozen over, which I thought was pretty cool. And so I really love my home, and I love the cultural and natural resources that provide us life there. And so I also just want to mention that I'm filling in today for a good colleague of mine here at OSTP, Rachel Daniel. She's the Deputy Director for the Arctic Executive Steering Committee and also leading our work on the Northern Bering Sea Climate Resilience Area, which I'll talk about a little bit later and also provide a little bit more info about Rachel. And so next slide, please. So before I talk about the Indigenous Knowledge Guidance, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Biden administration's polar efforts that we're helping to lead here at OSTP. Next slide. So the first one I wanted to mention was the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. And so I'm just going to call it IARPC. So IARPC brings together leaders from 16 agencies, departments, and offices across the US federal government. They were created under the Arctic Research and Policy Act of 1984, and IARPC is now chaired by the director of the National Science Foundation. So in December 2021, the White House OSTP released IARPC's Arctic Research Plan for the 2022-2026 biennium. And this is building on the successes and communities of practice of the 2017 and 2021 plan. So the new Arctic Research Plan, it's a bold strategy for a changing Arctic, and it outlines a vision for federal agencies to address emerging research questions about this vital region. And it provides pathways to strengthen relationships between federal agencies and Indigenous communities, academia and non-federal researchers, the state of Alaska, nonprofits, and private sector and international organizations. So the plan's priority areas respond to challenges identified by Arctic communities, federal agencies with a presence in Alaska or responsibility to understand the Arctic region, the state of Alaska, tribal and Indigenous organizations, and other non-federal entities. And so let me see here. And so you can see that the 4 priority areas and goals of the plan include community resilience and health, Arctic systems interactions, sustainable economies and livelihoods, and risk management and hazard mitigation. So you can go to the next slide, please. So next, I wanted to mention the Arctic Executive Steering Committee, which was established under Executive Order 13689, titled Enhancing Coordination of National Efforts in the Arctic. So next slide. So the AESC was created in 2015 under EO 13689 as the United States was preparing to assume chairmanship of the Arctic Council. It works to provide guidance to federal departments and agencies and to enhance coordination of federal Arctic policies. So the AESC, it coordinates with state, local, and Alaska Native tribal governments and other Alaska Native organizations, academic and research institutions, and the private and nonprofit sectors. And I do want to note that the AESC, it was dormant throughout the Trump administration, and it was reactivated in 2021 under President Biden. Next slide, please. So finally, I wanted to mention the Northern Bering Sea Climate Resilience Area. And so for those who were on the phone, I did include a picture of a walrus that you can see on our website for our NBS webpage, which I thought would be fun to include. But next slide. So the Northern Bering Sea Climate Resilience Area, it was established under Executive Order 13754 in 2016. And so on 2016, President Obama signed the EO and it created the Northern Bering Sea Climate Resilience Area. And President Biden reinstated this order on his first day in office. So it's been in place for a couple of years now. And so the EO provides that it shall be the policy of the United States to enhance the resilience of the Northern Bering Sea region by conserving the region's ecosystem, including those natural resources that provide important cultural and subsistence value and services to the people of the region. So the EO also created a task force on the Northern Bering Sea Climate Resilience Area, which is co-chaired by the Department of the Interior, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the U.S. Coast Guard, with a mandate to advance U.S. policy relating to the climate resilience area. And it also provides for an intergovernmental tribal advisory council to work in partnership with the task force and to provide input and recommendations on activities, regulations, guidance, or policy that may affect actions or conditions in the climate resilience area, with attention given to climate resilience, the rights, needs, and knowledge of Alaska Native tribes, and the delicate and unique ecosystem of the area. And it's also focused on the protection of marine mammals and other wildlife. And so I think that the creation of the NBS CRA, it represents a huge step forward in efforts to bolster resilience in the region. And I think now the question before us is what to do more specifically. And so I think that's why this partnership that has been formed between a large group of federal agencies with regulatory responsibilities related to the region and a diverse group of Alaska Native communities represented in an intergovernmental tribal advisory council is a good step towards achieving that goal. So next slide, please. So now I'm just going to provide a quick background on some of the current administrations and some past administrations' efforts around tribal consultation or commitment to tribal consultation. So next slide. So the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to strengthening relationships with tribal nations. So it is a priority of the administration to make respect for tribal sovereignty and self-governance, commitment to fulfilling federal trust and treaty responsibilities to tribal nations, and regular, meaningful, and robust consultation with tribal nation cornerstones of federal Indian policy. And so that's quoted from the Presidential Memorandum on Tribal Consultation and Strengthening Nation-to-Nation Relationships that was established in 2001. So this has launched several efforts, including a recommitment to Executive Order 13175, which requires each agency to prepare and periodically update a detailed plan of action to implement the policies and directives of that executive order. So next slide. And so just a little bit more about EO 13175. So it applies to rules, policies, and guidance with tribal implications, with those implications defined as having substantial direct effects on one or more Indian tribes, on the relationship between the federal government and Indian tribes, or on the distribution of power and responsibilities between the federal government and Indian tribes. And it requires the federal government to consult with federally recognized tribal nations on policies that affect them. Next slide. So for this last part of the presentation, I'm going to jump in to provide some background context and an update on the Presidential Memorandum to elevate Indigenous knowledge in federal decision-making. So the Biden-Harris administration, it hosted its first White House Tribal Nation Summit last November in 2021. And among several announcements and discussion that were included in the event, President Biden announced the White House initiative to elevate the role of Indigenous knowledge in federal decision-making. So this effort, it was motivated by requests from tribal leaders for the federal government to issue guidance around IK, and comes as part of the administration's commitments to strengthen relationships with tribal nations and Native communities. Next slide, please. Oh, and this might be the, you have to click for each bullet to come up, so I apologize for that. Thank you. So before I jump into talking about the guidance itself, we've been trying to pull together a list of examples of where Indigenous knowledge is in federal decision-making. And I was really grateful for Justin providing those two examples in the beginning, because that's exactly what we're hoping to do and what we've been trying to do throughout this engagement that we've been hosting throughout the past couple of months. And so just some examples that we've included in our research so far and in forming the guidance itself is the Cowlitz Indian Tribe and NOAA work around the application of tribal oral histories and reconstruction of fish distribution. Again, the Northern Bering Sea Climate Resilience Area work, where we're able to work with tribes or bring together tribes, Alaska Native nonprofits, elders, and traditional knowledge holders, and the federal government. We have an example about the Wabanaki tribal citizens and the National Park Service, so a shared governance system and research on sweetgrass harvesting. And I've been trying to practice this, Papahana Mokuakea Marine National Monument, trying not to butcher the name there. It is a beautiful name, but it is focused on co-management and Hawaiian knowledge. And so these are just some examples that we took into consideration before we started drafting the guidance document. So next slide, please. And so the OSTP CEQ Memorandum on Indigenous Knowledge and Federal Decision-Making. So this effort is being led jointly by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the Council on Environmental Quality, so CEQ. So again, the memorandum, it was released at the Tribal Nations Summit, and it announced a commitment and process to elevate IK in federal decision-making. And we are hoping that the White House guidance for federal agencies will be released later this year, so here coming up pretty soon. And the process so far has involved tribal consultation sessions, public listening sessions, and other engagement opportunities such as roundtables and a presentation public input session at the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals National Tribal Air Quality Forum in Oklahoma earlier this year, and other presentations such as this. And it looks like my internet connection. I'm going to turn my video off. Okay. So next slide, please. Thank you. So the guidance development process, it includes an interagency working group with more than 25 federal agencies and departments represented. And so this isn't the whole list on the slide here, but I wanted to give you all a sense of the breadth and depth of agency expertise involved in this effort. And so I know some folks are on the phone right now, so I'll just read off a few. And it includes the Department of the Interior, Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, Department of Labor, Department of Energy, the State Department, Department of Justice, Department of Education, Department of Transportation, Environmental Protection Agency, the USDA, the White House Council on Native American Affairs, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, National Science Foundation, the Smithsonian Institution, and the National Archives and Records Administration. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to take a quick second to show you all the team that is working on this effort. And so as you'll see, I put Rachel Daniel right in the middle, as she serves as the Deputy Director of the Arctic Executive Steering Committee. She's also our policy advisor for Indigenous Knowledge here at OSTP. And she's helping to lead the Northern Bering Sea climate resilience area work. And so I'm really lucky that I was able to try and help fill in for her. And I hope I'm doing her justice on all the great work that she's doing here at the office. And our team also includes Dr. Gretchen Goldman, who's our Assistant Director for Environmental Science, Engineering, Policy, and Justice. Alani Wilhelm, our Assistant Director for Ocean Conservation. Larry Hinsman, Assistant Director for Polar Sciences. Justin Padot, General Counsel from the Council on Environmental Quality. Dominic Mayone, Deputy Director for Species and Conservation at CEQ. And so that is our team here working on this effort. Next slide. So a little bit more about the guidance. So the guidance development process, it includes focus areas on definitions, collaboration, data sovereignty, relationship with Western science and federal policies and processes. And the content, it's going to be shaped by tribal consultations and input, or it has been shaped by tribal consultations and input. And it will include elements such as providing an overview of Indigenous knowledge, addressing the importance of growing and maintaining relationships with tribes and Indigenous peoples to support IK, and identifying statutory authorities and practices that can assist agencies to protect and apply Indigenous knowledge and collaborate with the tribes and Indigenous peoples who possess it. Catch up here in my notes. And next slide. So I did want to mention the tribal consultation engagement. So we do have an upcoming tribal consultation session on Thursday, September 22nd from 3 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. And we are hoping to mainly engage tribal leaders and tribal representatives. So this will be an official tribal consultation session. However, we are still accepting written comments from both tribes, community members, individuals, which can be submitted to our email here at OSTP, and that's itek@ostp.eop.gov by the end of day of October 11th, 2022. So we've extended that deadline another month out so we can make sure that folks have a chance to provide input. And so what I could do today, next slide, please, was to I guess, provide some questions to guide that input that might be helpful to both us, and then also just to get some thoughts going, especially for like these types of discussions today. And so I'll just read them out loud. So questions to guide input. What are specific aspects of the proposed guidance topics that would help ensure the appropriate consideration of Indigenous knowledge in federal decision making? What are specific practices related to the guidance that would enhance the effective and appropriate elevation of Indigenous knowledge in federal decision making? What are some opportunities that are particularly relevant to your tribal nation for federal agencies to consider IK decision making? In highly influential scientific assessments, like the National Climate Assessment, the federal government is required to ensure conclusions are supported by evidence of appropriate quality. How should Indigenous knowledge be evaluated for applications in such scientific assessments? Next slide. And so that's the end of my presentation. I didn't want to take up too much time because I really wanted to hear from you all about your questions or feedback and input, which would be really helpful. And I've included my email on this slide, and then just our link to our website here at OSTP. And so these slides will be shared after today's presentation by the organizers. And I think it is being recorded, so there will be a recording of the presentation. And so that is my presentation for today. And I think if we did want to bring up that last slide with the questions, that would be fine for the discussion portion if helpful. And with that, I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
All right. Thank you so much, Haley. Really appreciate that. Yeah, and I know you kind of already touched base on it, but one of the first things I see in the chat is, can that email be placed in the chat? I know the one that you mentioned as far as giving feedback back. We'll see if we can get that in there. I've also got something here from Tim Lewis, who says, how does ITEK interface with the Data Quality Act?
That's a good question. And just really quick about the email. So I don't have access to the chat. We're restricted here on our end with access to that. And so I don't know if someone wants to just type it into the chat and send it out for folks. I can just read it off again. It's itek@ostp.eop.gov. And then in terms of the, can you repeat that question again, Justin? I apologize.
No, of course. And if you can give me that email again real quick, I'll go ahead and put that out. That was ITEK at
OSTP. .eop.
Krista just got it.
Okay.
.gov. Okay, thank you. And appreciate that. And then yes, the other question was, how does ITEK interface with the Data Quality Act?
Interface with the Data Quality Information Act. Is that what I heard?
Yes, the Data Quality Act. You got it.
Data Quality Act. Okay. Yeah, that's something that we've been discussing and that the interagency working group has actually been doing a lot of work on. And I think that's going to be a big element that's included in the draft guidance. And I really wish that we were able to send it out. But again, approval and clearance processes take a very long time in the federal government, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. But that is something that we're hoping, or no, that is going to be included in the guidance. And I apologize, I don't have like a very in-depth answer for that right now, but I'm happy to send more information after the presentation with the slides.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And then with that, if anyone would like to raise their hand online or on the phone, we can start fielding other questions. And Tim says, thank you for the answer to that question.
Thanks, Tim. And maybe I can, if it's okay, I can just pose another question, something that, I think we've been compiling the list, and I talked about those examples earlier about Indigenous knowledge. and federal decision making. I would be really grateful to hear if anybody has any experiences about projects they may have worked on or partnerships that they think would be like serve as a really good example of something that we can highlight in the guidance itself, and then also even after it's published and its implementation. And so it's just something that I wanted to put out there again.
I see you raising your hand. You can go ahead and unmute and ask your question if you'd like.
For that very informative presentation, Haley. It's very nice to meet you and to see everyone here. Regarding the national plan implementation and moving across scales to the community level, the regional, the United States state level, and the national, will this working group or the plan for implementation move across the scale internationally as well?
Haley, did you hear that?
Oh, it looks like we may have lost her. No, she was
I don't see her anymore. She may have dropped off. Oh, wait,
Am I
yeah,
back?
you're right.
Oh, welcome back.
Okay.
Go ahead.
See, I'm having bandwidth issues here, and I might just really quickly, if it's okay, and I apologize for taking up this time, I'm going to call in with my phone just in case.
Sounds good. Please do.
You would think at the White House I would be able to get away without any technical difficulties, but that is not the case. Here we go.
Alaska understands bandwidth issues. Trust us.
Yes, yes.
And once Haley's got that sorted out, if you could just repeat that question. I don't know that Haley got that. So thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Also, I see some good examples coming in through the chat as well. So we'll be sure to read those out whenever she's back.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, if you could reread that question again, that would be really helpful.
Thank you.
I can't remember.
Again, Haley, for that very brief yet informative presentation regarding Indigenous knowledge and policy making. My question is related to moving across scales for those decisions that will be made, at the community, the state, the regional, and the national. Will the influence from the decisions that are made here move across scales internationally as well? And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for that question. In terms of the implementation plan, once we release the guidance, we are planning to do another round of engagement just because we want to make sure that people are aware of it and continue to share it and continue to learn and build upon it. And so within each federal agency that is a part of the interagency working group, I know they're really excited to share it and get it out and begin to start to consider ways that they can start applying Indigenous knowledge and learning from those examples that we're able to put into this initial draft. And so Internationally, I know that's something that's come up. Our assistant director for ocean conservation has been putting a lot of thought into it. She has done a lot of work with the Papahanaumokuakea National Marine area, and so we've been trying to ask ourselves, like, how will it apply at that scale? In terms of community engagement, that's, we have the opportunity to do these presentations with different, such as the Learning Network, and I'm hoping we're able to continue to work with, really good partners such as the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, who has been really helpful in making sure that we have engagement opportunities elsewhere, such as that National Tribal Air Quality Forum, which maybe one person wouldn't think Indigenous Knowledge would be able, like, what's the interface there? And so we were able to use that as a good learning opportunity. But that's what I find really exciting, is that I just think there is a lot of opportunity for this to build and grow. And I think that interagency working group that is helping to lead this, we have over 25 agencies working on it, which I think is really exciting. And I'll just have to say, from being a part of those meetings, most representatives from each agency has been present and active in the conversation. And so that shows me that there is a big investment in this. Over.
Great. Thank you, Haley. I'm going to do a couple of people that have provided input through the chat, and then we'll open it back up. I've got Janessa Esquibble says, thank you for the presentation, Haley. The Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission would be a good example of including ITEK in the decision-making processes. I've also got Lisa Sheffield Guy says that another example would be the Arctic Indigenous Scholars Program, partnership between ARCUS and ICC Alaska with support from NSF. It supports travel and arranges meetings for scholars with federal decision makers in DC. So with that, just wanted to make sure that was put out there. And if anybody else has a question, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Okay, I've got another question. Do you have any recommendations for how tribes can best prepare for the upcoming tribal consultation?
Yeah, I think that's why. So one thing that we're going to do is we're planning to send out a Dear Tribal Leader letter. And so one of our senior advisors here for the White House Council on Native American Affairs, he's going to be sending it out to tribal leaders from across the nation with those questions that I put up earlier, those questions to guide input. And our hope is, fingers crossed, is that we'll be able to send out the draft guidance document for their review before the session. And I know it is pretty, since it's coming up so quick, that doesn't give a lot of time for input or for, say someone to bring some really meaningful questions forward. And that's why we extended that deadline for written comments to October 11th, because we were initially going to close it on right after that consultation session on the 22nd. And so that's one way, we are planning to send out information. And I would also actually, we do have a web page on our OSTP site with our engagement readouts. And so what we did is we compiled all of the input and tried to highlight some key topics that kept emerging. And so we have been using that input to inform the guidance document so far, but I think it might be helpful to check that page out, and I can send links to more information about that after the presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I've got another example here from Zachary Ormsby. It says the Society of Ethnobiology issues a peer-reviewed journal and other references with tons of research relative to ITEK across the globe.
Oh, wow. Okay. I would love to get the link to that document. I think I got it noted here in my notes, but that would be great if it could be shared.
Yeah, and I will say we will also send out the entire chat will be available after this presentation as well. So all
Oh,
of
perfect.
yeah, everybody will have access to all of the things that were shared and all of the links and things. They'll be up on our website by the end of this week.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions for Haley? Okay, I see something here from, apologize if I get this wrong. Ketunak Benjamin Charles says ICC has numerous reports with high emphasis on Indigenous knowledge and recently released the Equitable and Ethical Engagement Protocols.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, and I see Ketunak Benjamin Charles just raised his hand. Please go ahead.
I feel like I'm taking up a lot of time and space, but there are no questions. Thank you again for providing this opportunity to provide the synopsis of the activities that will occur regarding IK and decision-making that will be made at the national level. My question is in regard to the protocols of Indigenous communities and Indigenous peoples. Will the national implementation have specific protocols that would be referenced to for engagement of Indigenous peoples? For example, I put in the chat that ICC recently released the e-protocols, triple E protocols that were created over many years by Inuit and our commonalities of how to engage and equitably acknowledge Indigenous knowledge from Inuit. And this would be a great example. Or will there be other protocols that will be created when engaging with other Indigenous people?
Yeah, thank you for that. I will say that in the draft guidance, not in this initial round before the tribal consultation session, but we are planning to include a list of such protocols just as examples for federal agencies to utilize and take into consideration. That's something that is going to be a big part of the guidance itself. One of the big sections is focusing on engagement and building sustaining relationships between federal agencies and tribes and Indigenous communities, and making sure that there are respecting, because we know that, or at least I know that every tribe and every community has their own protocol in the way that they interact with each other. And so that's why it's a guidance document. It's supposed to provide, like, here is a high level set of ways that you can best engage with tribes and tribal nations and Indigenous communities on Indigenous knowledge and federal decision making. And so I'm actually really excited for this list that we're putting together. That's something that we've heard quite a bit in the listening session we held a couple of months ago, and the tribal consultation sessions we held back in April. And those roundtables I mentioned is, how can we make this a resource document, not only for federal agencies, but others as well, so including tribes or intertribal organizations and community members. And so thank you for providing that example earlier as well.
All right, thank you again. Yeah, great question, and thank you, Haley, for the answer there. Last call. Anybody, any other questions before we wrap things up? Okay, well, thank you again, Haley. I'm just gonna share my screen again real quickly and just kind of wrap things up. Appreciate everyone again. Let me just go ahead and share real quick. And so just wanted to say thank you everyone for taking part today. I really appreciate you, Haley, spending time and speaking and presenting with us as part of this information session today. We just got some main contact information here to end with, and a couple of announcements. So I've already introduced myself. I'm the middle contact on the left there, Justin Leon. We've got Krista Haringa, who is here with us today and has been helping moderate the session behind the scenes. And then Melinda Chase, I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with her. She was not able to be here today, but essential in getting things together as well. And so we've got all of our emails there. Please feel free to reach out to us. We just want to be able to support tribes, as we talked about earlier. And we've got a couple announcements on the right. There's the tribal consultation on guidance for federal agencies on Indigenous knowledge. That's going to be taking place September 22nd. It's already been referenced. We've got the Tribal Climate Adaptation 101 workshop. That's going to be put on and hosted by the Learning Network, which again is hosting the information session today. That's going to be October 4th through the 6th in Fairbanks. There are travel reimbursements being offered to attend the course. So if that is a stumbling block, please feel free to contact myself or others as far as potentially getting travel reimbursed. We've got the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society Regional Conference, which again is part of the collaboration that's hosting this through the Learning Network. The regional conference is going to be taking place right before AFN. It's October 19th, the Wednesday before AFN. There will be travel reimbursements for that as well, and stipends for the first, I think, 10 people that register. And then we've got, or I should say, you're welcome to contact any of us about the regional conference, but I'm specifically involved with the planning of that. So feel free to reach out to me. And then we've got applications for the Arctic Rivers Summit are open through September 23rd. And for anybody who is getting this PowerPoint presentation after we're done here, these links are all clickable and should be able to get you to the right place to register for any of these upcoming events. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning, the website for any other additional information that we have for the Learning Network, the website, the link is posted at the bottom as well. And so with that, let me just check here. Yeah, thanks again. And we've got our last slide just saying just that. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to continuing to see everyone and work with everyone and continuing to support everybody. So thank you again, and take care. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of the week.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Haley, again. Take care.